You're listening to the Heroes Podcast Network.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Kaiju Curry House. I am your, I guess, temporary noodle cook, if this is a curry house. No, wait, you don't put curry on noodles. Crap, I screwed it all up. Alex, I screwed it up.
Good. Right.
No, this is episode 60, and I'm Matt Frank. I've been around every now and then. Excuse me, I'm here with Alex, James, Jonathan, and Paul. That's it. I'm done. I'm never doing it again.
No. You're a man of few words. Any questions? How is everyone doing anyway?
We're good.
Wow, tough crowd. Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year indeed. Yeah, we're nearly there, aren't we? Right. Let's get a show on the road. Paul, what have Kaiju been up to?
I've been gifted with things over Christmas, so not to bore you for too long, but I got a Tremors movie.
Nice.
Yeah, I treated myself to Tremors on Ultra HD, and I bought Tremors Shrieker Island as well. I got a Godzilla calendar. I got some Godzilla playing cards, which were quite funky because each card has a different movie poster on, and there's not that many different movie posters, so they've actually gone on to like some Gamera and Gargantua and stuff. So that was quite nice gifts there from the children. And other than that, I've actually been watching Tremors films. We've watched watched 5 of them so far this week with my wife. Yeah, had a bit of a Tremors marathon.
A lot of discussion the word Tremors. Should we actually explain why we're here?
Go on, then.
I mean, you had one job, Matt. You had one job.
Oh, crap. I missed that part up, too.
You did indeed. Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name's Alex. I'm one of your regular hosts. And today I am joined by my regular friend, co-host, Paul. And we have Jonathan Melville. And Jonathan, what's your exact role so that I get it correct?
Well, I wrote a book on the Tremors films called Seeking Perfection, The Unofficial Guide to Tremors. So I'm basically a writer and a sort of arts journalist, really.
Fantastic. And you were heavily involved with the audio commentary for the 4K release, am I right? Splendid.
That's the other thing. Yes, I was involved in the set. Yes.
You were indeed. Yeah, we're doing a terrible job of kind of selling everyone here. And we have the disc producer from Arrow Video himself, Mr. James Flower. How is it going, James?
I'm good. Thank you very much, Alex.
Splendid.
In here from Tier 4 London, having had a very quiet Christmas where we didn't do very much. We've been watching X-Files. That's basically what we've been doing the last week.
Which season?
That sounds good.
We're in season 2 at the moment, so still pretty
It's
early.
fine. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. I think by season 5, forget it. Yeah.
Yes. It's pretty on and off by then. But yeah.
Yeah. And we have returning guest, renowned artist and good friend, Mr. Matt Frank, who did the art for the 4K release of the first Tremors film. So you've got to start us off, Paul. Ask the question to someone else.
Let's go with Matt. What have Kaiju been up to?
Well, as it is with most people, I've been Christmasing it up out here in the States where just everything's fine and we don't have anything to worry about. And, for as far as Kaiju related stuff, I did get a big box in the mail the other day from our friends at SRS Cinema here in the States. They put out the American Blu-ray of Howl from Beyond the Fog, which is a lovely short kaiju film where the kaiju is a man in suit and the humans are all puppets. It's just a beautiful film, and it's now available here in the States. And I did the reversible cover for it. Which was originally just a piece of fan art I did because I liked the Kickstarter so much. And then the director of the film contacted me and said, can I use this on everything? And I said, sure, go for it, man. So I think that's one of the big things for me. That and this, I went out and got this Tremors 7 movie collection because I realized that there was 3 other Tremors movies I hadn't seen, so I'm getting caught up. But yeah, so should I pass it along to someone else?
By all means.
All right. James, Mr. James Flower, what have Kaiju been up to?
Oh, well, other than, like I said, having a very kind of laid-back, limited Christmas break where we, because of the restrictions here in the UK, where we're under what's called Tier 4, where we are not really allowed to leave our homes except for kind of going out kind of going to the shops and getting essentials and that kind of thing. So my wife and I have spent our kind of first Christmas away from our family. So we've just been here in our flat at home with our dog, watching every Christmas film that we have on Blu-ray with episodes of the X-Files scattered in between as well, and just having a very nice relaxed time just by ourselves. So that's pretty much it recently. Other than that, it's just been carrying on with working on Arrow's upcoming releases, including the Invisible Man double bill. Sorry, the double bill of Day Eye Invisible Man films that we announced the other week. So kind of prepping that, getting that ready for release in March, and lots of other exciting things too.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that release because I've heard of those films many times, those Japanese Invisible Man films, and seeing those coming out, it's just like, not only am I excited for something I've never seen before, but I'm also excited as like, what other stuff are they going to put out? This other stuff.
Oh, well, it's a really interesting one because those two films those are kind of the opposite to Tremors in one sense, where it's really one where the materials that were available for both films, that they aren't remasters that were done by us. They were done by Kadokawa, who are the studio in Japan who own Gamera and Invisible Man and Warning from Space and some of the other films that we released. There's Gammy. And it was very much a kind of, look, these are kind of done from the best surviving materials. They don't look great, but it's kind of take it or leave them. And, even though they kind of fall a bit short of what we would usually kind of be our standards for some of these titles, we were like, they're so rare and no one's going to get to see them otherwise. Let's just put them out. And if, hopefully people will understand, we'll put disclaimers up and everything. But I hope people give them a chance all the same, because they're really cool, interesting variants on, well, especially the first one, Invisible Man Appears. It's such a cool kind of Japanese take on what Universal had been doing earlier in the decade with their Invisible Man films. So we've that comes out in March, and it's the two films, and on the disc there's a appreciation by Kim Newman on sort of the Invisible Man genre in general and how those two films fit within it. And there's a terrific booklet that comes with 3 different essays that explore the history about the films in much more depth. So there's my plug for the upcoming Japanese fun from Arrow, and there's lots more coming up, we promise. So keep your eyes peeled on our release slate.
It's awesome. James, do you want to ask someone else what Kaiju have been up to?
Oh, very well. Alex, what have Kaiju been up to?
Oh, thank you very much for asking. Other than doing Christmas walks with my children, because I've been able to have a little bit more freedom than many parts of the UK, I decided that I needed to come to this episode with some kind of fresh content. And I made a purposeful sit down of picking a Netflix Kaiju movie, and I chose The Monster, which is from 2016 and directed by Brian Bertino. Has anyone seen it? It is just called The Monster.
Is that the one with Zoe Kazan?
It is indeed, yes.
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
With the couple in the car?
The couple in the car. So it's the mother and daughter in the car.
Mother and daughter, yes.
Yeah. I'll be honest, it didn't get a fantastic raving review online. On IMDb, it's only got like 5.4, so it's not like a phenomenally highly regarded film. And my kind of take on it was, I thought it was good. I wouldn't say it was very good. I gave it a sort of 6 out of 10. What was strong about it, though, was the human element, which is rare for kaiju films, because normally people kind of witter on about, the monsters are great, but I wish the humans weren't. Oh, shut up. Sarah. But actually, in this example, the monster for me was quite unremarkable. It was basically just a beastie in the woods. It came out, it attacked people, dragged them off, killed them, and then kind of went off again. It's like, all right. Plenty of films have done that before, and plenty of films have done it better. However, the human element focused on the dysfunctional relationship between a very, very troubled mother who was not particularly well mentally and her daughter, who's now a teenager and has kind of moved on to live with dad and has come back for a bit to see her mum. And it was interesting to see a completely dysfunctional relationship put into a situation where they had to work as a team.
Is the monster a metaphor? Is it?
It could be, yes, quite possibly. But yeah, the human acting was kind of the standout for me rather than the critters. So that was quite nice.
Okay. I did like the acting, but I wasn't a big fan of the mother. I don't know if it's because she was just such a horrible person, but
Yeah.
In a sense, you weren't really meant to like the mother, but she was
yeah.
a well-written character, I thought.
I'm curious. So, what separates a kaiju film from just a creature feature for you guys? Because I was under the impression that
It doesn't to
kaiju
me.
had to be
They're all the
very
same.
fun.
Monster movie, creature feature, kaiju, it's all the same.
I have a lot of thoughts on this subject, but I can maybe just keep my mouth shut.
I think there's a risk of all of the white people kaiju splaining something, but but what I would say is that my kind of take on it is that as a podcast, Kaiju Curry House is a creature cinema and kind of Asian traditional monster movie, but then we also include Ray Harryhausen, which when I've nattered to some people, they've said, yeah, it's kaiju. Other people have said, no, it's not. So my take is just that we love monsters, and I include kind of anything from a more Western stance to something more traditionalist. But Matt, you're a more informed individual, so go for it.
Well, I don't want to go all cuck.
No, please, go on.
I was gonna say I don't want to go all cuck Frank on everybody, but I mean the short version is really, even if you were even to ask Japanese fans, they don't seem to have a definitive answer themselves as to what the difference is, because there isn't that much of a difference. It's just that I would say it has more to do with what the relationship is between the monster and the world around it. And it's not even a question of size or scale. But one thing I've told people is, like, for example, there's this thing that the Game Grumps started, which is Clifford the Big Red Dog is a kaiju, which is just a meme. It's a dumb joke that got out of hand. And I'm like, no, he's not, because he's just a big dog. And I think that, like, something that's just a bigger version of something else is not a kaiju. It's barely even a monster, because a kaiju, I think that something that makes it a good kaiju is something that is inherently mysterious, inherently unknowable. Like, from what you're describing, The Monster, that movie sounds like it could be. You could categorize it as a kaiju, because in a lot of ways it's metaphorical. In a lot of ways it's not just some wild animal. You know, there's lots of little aspects of it, but I have maybe been writing a feature-length essay-long YouTube video for like the last 2 years about, like, all right, listen, you morons. I maybe I won't start it with that. I'll workshop that a little bit. But that's kind of that's the long and the short of it. I think that you're right, though. If monsters and creatures and all that and kaiju, they all share the same DNA, so you can enjoy them all as much as you want. But I think there is a discussion as to what counts as a kaiju and what doesn't. I just can't say it all here. It'll take me hours.
We've done previous episodes where we've tried to discuss what is a kaiju, and we've waffled for 80 minutes, and at the end we've gone, right, so no one agrees.
It's not worth it. Let's just enjoy them.
I still think that It Follows is a kaiju movie, which was the hot take of that episode. No one agreed with me, but it's a strange beast that's attacking people. So there you go. Right. Anyway, well, okay, I've lost one of the guests. Right, I'm going to rein it. I'm going to rein it. So yeah, watch 2016's The Monster. Right, passing it on. Jonathan, what have kaiju been up to?
Yeah, well, just kind of doing Christmassy things, really. I'm not going to bore you with it all. We watched The Boys season 2. That kind of was a big-ish thing we're watching and really enjoying. I enjoyed the first season, but I think I preferred the second one. I'm watching a few films, including, well, Tremors, of course, and the extras, because I wanted to see what else was on this amazing set. So yeah, not much more than that, really. Just odd bits of TV lots of, we've got amazing streaming things here. Oh, Mandalorian as well, season 2. That was another thing I was watching.
That was a good show.
Yeah,
I've
really
thoroughly enjoyed that. And
It's
it has
great
had
fun.
some monsters in it, some great monsters.
Absolutely, yeah. That kind of counts almost for this. You should do an episode on it or two.
We should, but then Star Wars fans are toxic and I hate them. So,
Yeah, I can't think of something I'd rather do less than talk about Star Wars on a public forum.
I know what you'd rather do, Matt. First question's for you. In 30 seconds, and yes, I'll time you, describe the plot of the first Tremors film. You've got 5 seconds to prepare yourself, and then I'm going to capture you for 30 seconds describing it.
Okay.
3.
Back of the box.
2, go.
So 2 essential workers who may not be that essential have to compete with a pair of a quintuplet of large worms, and hijinks ensue.
Not bad.
That's all you get. That's all you get.
Wow. Okay.
How long was that?
It was 13 seconds of waffle. It was glorious. Okay,
I could try again.
No, it was fine. So why are we here to celebrate the 4K remaster? I think, Jonathan, you had an interesting question for James first of all to start us off.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll put a brief plug in for my book, because that's kind of where my involvement in Tremors started. Was back in 2015, I released a book all about Tremors, Seeking Perfection. And at that point, Tremors was kind of, well, when I started writing the book, the franchise was kind of dead almost. There hadn't been a film since, I think, 2004. I think that's right. And so, yeah, so I wrote this book and released it, and it did okay. But I was really surprised when I heard things were happening with originally with the Making, what was the title? Making Perfection, I think it was, the documentary.
The new documentary,
yeah, which I heard about last year, because Matthew, who you had on your other Tremors episode, Matthew Sneed, got in touch and asked if I wanted to be in the documentary, and then we didn't know that this was coming from Arrow. So my question, really, a long-winded way of getting to it, is to ask James about how did Arrow hit upon this idea of bringing out Tremors when it is a popular film, but at the same time it still feels kind of culty. But it's a funny film.
Well, I think that description really hits the nail on the head as to why it's a perfect Arrow release.
True.
It's it's probably been one of our most requested films over the years. People have just been dying for us to do Tremors for a few reasons, I think. I mean, it's very flattering when people want us to release a title, or where they say, oh, it'd be wonderful if Arrow did this film, usually because they have a high opinion of our restorations that we do of films. So where Arrow is known for not just accepting whatever high definition master they're handed by a studio kind of all of the time, whenever we can, we like to give the films new life by actually digitally restoring the film. So doing a new 2K or even 4K in this, as in this case, remastered the film, which can really make it sing and come alive for a new generation. And also because I kind of put our money where our mouth is in terms of additional contextual material as well. We want people to be able to really dig into the story of how these films were made and other interpretations of them. So, and the Tremors release that had come out for years, there was, for the people who are kind of videophiles, for the people who really know about picture quality, Tremors was one of the titles where they were like, this could look so much better. There's issues with this that kind of, if a company like Arrow got hold of it, they could really do something cool with it. But that's not to say that, Universal were necessarily open to that possibility for a number of years. I think that the line that we had for a long time was that because it was an active franchise, quote unquote, we weren't going to be allowed to sublicense it because they were busy exploiting it for themselves. But we've built up a tremendous relationship with Universal, kind of working with them on releases of other films, whether it's American Werewolf in London or Weird Science, or in much older stuff as well, going back to classic Hollywood films that we've remastered as well. So eventually the time came where they were willing to give us a go at Tremors, and initially it was a deal just for the UK, but then Eventually, they were open to letting us have the US as well, so we were able to really go all out and do this all singing, all dancing, terrific edition. I speak very big-headed. This, I would hope that if I was on the outside looking in and I was a fan, I would, think it is great. I'm very proud of how it's come out. So it's and that's speaking as someone who's a fan of the film for a long time as well. When the project fell in my lap, which was just over a year ago, it was like, oh crap, I've got to deliver on this now. But on the other hand, it was good because I knew that it was a film that all the people who were involved in the making of it, and this is a story that this is something that you hear again and again in the extras that are on the disc and in Jonathan's book as well. It's a film that everyone who was involved in it is tremendously proud of, and it's a film that so many people have so many warm feelings around, and it's just because it's such a lovely film. It's such a sweet, good-natured film as well for a giant monster movie where people are being sucked underground and eaten. It leaves you with a great big smile on your face. So I knew on the one hand it might actually be a kind of, as it turned out to be to some degree, a fairly easy film to work on because, the filmmakers were still very proud of it and they were willing to be involved, and they hadn't done a commentary before. So we knew that would be something great for them to do. Then COVID happened, and then it was like, oh my God, are we going to still be able to do all the things that we want to do? But between the things that we were able to sort out despite COVID and the work that Universal had already done for their YouTube channel, which Matthew talked about in the previous episode of the podcast, that's, it all kind of came together eventually. So there's my rambling answer.
Okay. Well, can I get you to ramble on just a little bit longer? Because I opted for the 4K disc, which is my first 4K disc film that I've watched. The rest have just been streaming. So I was curious about what the quality would be like on a 30-year-old film. And some of the scenes are crystal clear. And I said, how have you? Is it all digitally enhanced from the original film? Is that how it's done?
So how it works is basically when you're doing a 4K restoration, or any restoration really, even if it's just a 2K, but particularly if you're doing one at 4K, what you want to do is that you want to go back to the original camera negative and do a new 4K scan of that. So basically how it works is that, and I might be over-explaining this for some people, but just for people who don't know how...
It's interesting.
No, just for people who don't know how films were made sort of 30 years and beyond, films weren't filmed digitally. That technology didn't really exist yet. Films were shot on 35mm film. So each frame, so there's 24 frames in a second. Each frame is just a picture, a still picture, and 24 of them run in a second on 35mm film. And so that original 35mm film that went through the camera, which is called the original camera negative, which then other kind of 35mm copies are made, which then other copies are made. So there's a bunch of generations that go through, and in each generation, a little bit of picture quality is lost. But that is ultimately, those were the 35mm copies that went out in cinemas and that were used for other purposes as well. But that original 35mm negative that's just been sitting in the vault at Universal. So it's the thing with 35mm films that you need to keep it in vaults, you need to keep it temperature controlled, and you need to keep it cool and dry. Because if you do that, then it'll last for decades, if not centuries. Whereas some films, if they're not kept in good condition, then they start to crumble and fall apart. But Tremors, luckily, the original negative, the original film that went through the camera, was kept in pristine condition. So we were able to, with Universal's permission, access that original negative, scan every single frame in 4K resolution, which is, I'm going to remember this off the top of my head. Hang on. So it's 2,160 by... No, wait, it's the other way around. Hang on. 3,840 by 2,160 pixels. So that basically means it's 4 times the size of HD. So a huge amount of detail being captured in every single frame. And then we kind of put that into an image sequence. And then with the assistance of Ron Underwood, the director, and Alexander Grushinsky, the director of photography. We graded it in the way that it would have originally been seen in cinemas and how they originally wanted the film to look. And that's the 4K master that you have before you. And now there's other technology as well, like Dolby Vision, which is a thing with 4K where it's a wider color space where essentially you can see more details and textures and shadows and things like that. So all of these things that the technology affords you the ability to do that, you know, just even a couple of years ago we wouldn't have been able to do, but the market has got to the point where we can do it and not lose our shirts over it. In fact, the opposite, it's been a terrific success. So it's really great that Tremors is one of the films that, you know, we've been able to do that with, because it's one that we've wanted to do for the longest time.
Oh, thanks very much.
Well, there you go. Yeah,
great job.
It's time for our first break. When we return, we'll hear more about this and fire some questions at you all. Welcome back to this second part of Kaiju Curry House. You are joined today by Jonathan, James, Matt, and your usual hosts, Paul and myself, Alex. I've got a question for Matt Frank. This question is from my friend Matthew from Botchamania.
All right.
And he's a very, very big fan of you. He likes two things. He likes wrestling and he likes crap monster movies. So he's all
Hell
about
yeah.
Frank. And he says, if you could illustrate one cover to any film of your choice, what would that be?
Oh, crap. Now I have to think about this. It's almost impossible to answer that question because I love so many different films, and so many different films mean stuff to me. I didn't think in a million years I would do Tremors, because that really was a delightful surprise, and it made me fall in love with that film and the broader franchise all over again. But if make me pick one.
Would you rather come back to it later?
No, we need to do this now.
Okay.
If I had to pick one moving forward, I don't know, maybe Daimajin would be cool.
Nice.
Like Daimajin would be cool, or maybe Gappa the Triphibian monster, or maybe Jurassic Park. Yeah. Anyway, I feel like I've answered that question before, but it's still fun though. It's always fun to hear.
Question from Invader Design, who plug to them. They do a lot of the 3D modeling that we commission, and you will hear them in our adverts for this episode. Invader Design would like to ask, are Arrow intending to do Tremors 2? And I'm sure you've already been asked that by fans.
A few people have asked. Yeah, it's genuinely, it's not on our radar at the moment. It's not on our plans, but I'd really like to do it. It's if the option does come up, then I'd certainly be interested in doing it for a few reasons. One, it's the last Tremors film that they made before things went digital with post-production, so presumably it's one where there's a negative that exists, which might not be the case for the later films. Even though I don't know how all of the CGI would necessarily stand up today, but it's a really fun sequel that's kind of almost, I think, as good as the first one, I think. And there's still and you know, Steve Wilson, the director of Tremors 2, who's also one of the writers and producers of Tremors 1, is incredibly generous with his time and was very willing to help out on this one. So I know that he'd be just as helpful on this one. Apparently there's like a making of VHS that was sent to dealers to that's not in the extras that are on the current DVD anyway. So if we could dig that up, that'd be great. But it's not in it's not happening at the moment, but if you know, I will certainly bring it forward as a suggestion for the future, hopefully. So we'll see.
It's funny because it's so funny to bring up the sequels, because I joined the official Tremors fan group on Facebook, and one thing I really did notice, and I have been noticing about the Tremors fans, is that unlike a lot of franchises where people will say, well, the original's the best, even though in this case it is true, and they kind of poo-poo all the sequels, the fans really do love like all of the movies, and for one reason or another. And I think that's kind of refreshing, because you know, and that was one of the things when I started posting the Tremors art on my various social media platforms, people were like, oh, is it the whole series? And it's like, no, it's just the original.
No,
and
it's not. I think Arrow aren't alone in this, I think, but I think there's a bit of a blind spot towards sort of DTV releases, direct-to-video sequels and things like that, and a lot of them are crap, let's be honest. But I mean, that's, you know, when you have ones that are genuinely really fun, like Tremors 2, I think it's a shame that they get lumped in with some of the bad stuff. But
Yeah.
no, it was never never doing the whole series was never an option. I think doing the first one was hard enough. But I mean, well,
Well, let's
knows?
put you on the spot, James. What
Okay.
would you order them? Because there are 7 films now to pick
Oh,
from.
God.
You know, I've only seen the first 4, so I can't. I haven't seen 5, 6, and 7. I'm afraid I did not
That's-
go far.
Wow.
Yeah, I
I'm
know,
disappointed.
Well, you know, it's loyalty to the original creators. 'Cause they were
sure.
involved in the later one, so that's my. God, I mean, the first one is obviously the best, but then I don't know. Maybe I'd go in like 1, 2, 4, 3. I think.
Tremors
Sort
2
of
is my
thing, yeah.
favourite. I love Tremors 2. I think it's a wonderful film.
It is really good.
It's joyous. I have not laughed so much at a film in a long time as seeing it. Paul, question for you actually. As an Uber fan, because next month we'll have been recording for 2 years together, and you've dropped Tremors into the conversation nearly every single episode, which is 60 times, which is good effort. What are your thoughts on this release? Does it live up to your expectations?
As my first 4K experience, I was very pleased with the restoration of this film, and the extras are, above and beyond. So, and it comes with the little lobby cards with Matt Frank's graboid design there. We get to see all the inside bits.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of unboxing
And the
videos
book.
on YouTube, obviously, but
there's
a poster here. There's a graboid anatomy poster as well. Booklet with Jonathan did an essay for us, a new one, and then there's original press notes and other bits and bobs. Then in the actual case, you get replica lobby cards.
There's even a little Walter Chang's voucher for his store. Yeah, that's it. It's just it's another level of extras, isn't it? Really.
I hadn't found that little note card, that little what's the word I'm looking for? Coupon. Thank you. I didn't find that little coupon until like 2 or 3 days after I got the set, and then I'm like showing it to everyone, like, look at this, that's amazing.
So that's why we want you to do the whole set. All 7 films and the TV series.
It would be a cereal box size, wouldn't it? Like the Gamera.
Yeah, basically like Gamera. And if I could just put a little request in, because I'm watching the film in Tremors 3. They go into the store, and obviously it's all we are perfection. This is our store, and they have the comics of Graboids, Shriekers, and Graboids versus Shriekers.
Oh yeah, well that was.
And if you could put those in a box set, and actually, like,
all right, so I don't want to say nothing here, but I might be doing something along those lines just for fun, right?
Okay.
Now. Maybe I can tweet out and be like, "Hey, Dark Horse! Hey, Dark Horse!
Yes.
Hey, money on the table."
Just make sure you spell Shrieker right, because they spell it wrong on the front of the comic.
I didn't even pick up on that. That's great.
Shrieker.
Yeah.
Because that kind of thing was my original thought of where we might go up for the cover art. So originally I was trying to find someone who could maybe do that, or maybe something that was a bit more subtle, dare I say, where it was more kind of to do with the ground and it having not quite erupted yet. But I asked 1 or 2 people, and surprisingly enough, they were either non-committal or just generally kind of blew me off. So after a while, I was like, what the hell am I doing? I've got Matt Frank on,
yeah, Matt's subtle, right?
Matt's on speed dial. Let's just get him to do a giant monster. That's everyone's seen Tremors at this point. There's not really much point in having mystery around the graboids. Let's just show him. Let's have Matt do him. It'll be great. And lo and behold, he delivered.
Oh, thank you. It's funny you say that, because you and I went back and forth on those original sketches several times, and because I wanted to do something really subtle. I wanted to do something like focusing on the ground and focusing more silhouette-like, or more very conservative visually to hide the tremors.
A bit more ominous.
Yeah, or just something a little more on the subtle and almost pop art. Like, I wanted it to be almost solid color silhouettes and stuff. And James, rightly so, was like, nah. We just went back and forth, and I just did this one sketch of the graboid coming out of the ground with that. What did I call it? The Matt Frank shriek, which is what people started calling it, of like the roar with the head to the side kind of thing. And James really liked that, and I thought, yeah, I guess I'll lean into it. But then James brought some really great art direction to the table, and especially with the color palette and the title treatment of the Tremors part itself. I don't know if we want to get into that or if we wanted to circle back around to it.
No, go for it. It's interesting.
Well, I mean, if I remember this correctly, James, you made the suggestion of putting in a particular scene into the title
treatment.
Yeah. And you suggested the pole vaulting scene, which I had forgotten about, and I had to go back and rewatch the film and be like, oh, right, they do that at one point. And I was kind of struggling with it a little bit because I'm like, how exactly am I going to illustrate this? And, how do I want to integrate it? What colors do I want to use? And eventually I just had you send me a screenshot of the of that scene. And before anyone's like, oh, that fake is a tracer, it was time consuming to go over the shot itself and give it this illustrated pop art quality to it, to give it like a lot of cross hatching to recreate the shadows. There's a lot of brush where you can't really tell, the detail is kind of lost because it's such a wide panoramic shot. And and at a certain point I couldn't tell who was on what pole so I had to fudge those details a little bit. But then when I took a step back, I noticed like, oh man, this really works. This really, really works in this, like, drawing from life kind of way. And like I said, then we really went back and forth on the color choices, and I feel like it pops in a way that is kind of unique for the stuff I've done. Of course, building off of the Gamera art style too, which I integrated a little of that with all these fun Photoshop brushes I had found. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, you did a really good job, Matt. I think it's fantastic artwork, just like your Gamera artwork. And speaking of the Gamera, that was quite a limited set that sold out rather quickly,
almost immediately, which took us all by surprise. It was like,
yeah.
So this Tremors box set, it's Blu-ray and 4K, isn't it? There's two releases.
That's right. So it's not a dual format release. There's either a box set with the feature on a 4K disc or one with the feature on a Blu-ray disc. So
okay, and are these both limited run as well?
So this initial version that we've all been holding up here, this is a limited edition that comes with the extra stuff. So like the poster and the booklet and the lobby cards, and also the bonus disc that comes with both versions, which is a Blu-ray with extended interviews and short films and
yes,
the Q&A from Hollywood that Jonathan very kindly gave us the footage of. So that won't be in the standard release. So if you want all the extra stuff, get it now. Otherwise, the standard edition that's coming out early next year will just be the main feature disc in a case like this. So
much in the same way as the Gamera that you're releasing.
Yeah,
trimmed down. Yeah,
essentially, yeah, a pared down, simplified version. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've been saying to fans, of course, buy this version if you can, partly just because it is beautiful, but partly because of that second disc. Because especially those films, those S.S. Wilson films, and the Stampede, the guys from Stampede who made those films. When I was writing the book, I was talking about these films, but I couldn't see them. There was no way to easily see them. And now here they are. You can buy them.
It's very
on
cool.
Amazon.
I was very gung ho about including a couple of 2 or 3 of them if we could. I mean, the first film that's on there is Recorded Live, which, for anyone who hasn't seen Recorded Live, you can see it on YouTube in non-remastered quality. I'd say it's still worth it. It's Steve Wilson's student film that he made in 1975, which is about stop motion tape reels eating people, and it's very, very, very cool. And like, it played on HBO all the time in the early 80s and gave kids nightmares and all this kind of thing. So I was very, very happy that we were able to remaster that one. But then going to some of the other ones that Jonathan's talking about, like Dictionary, An Adventure with Words, which has a stop motion talking dictionary. And these were films that were made to show in classrooms. So before classrooms all had VHS players, they all had 16mm projectors. So they'd all be sent these educational films on rolls of 16mm film, and these are these kinds of films, and I had no way of having seen many of these myself, so I was kind of in the same boat, thinking, well, hopefully they're good. I'm guessing they will be cool based on the people who made them.
Yeah.
But it was kind of going off on the wing and a prayer. But I was very pleased with how they all came out. There was another film. There was another 16mm film that I really wanted us to try and include called Deer in the Works, which Ron Underwood directed in 1980, and Brent Maddock wrote the script for that, which is an adaptation of a Kurt Vonnegut short story. But we kind of veered away from that because of uncertainty over the rights, and particularly with the Vonnegut estate and how that would work. So, which I'm really sad, because more than anything, I wanted to see it. That was, there'd be no other way for me to see it. I don't have a 16mm projector, so there's, outside of finding a print on eBay and getting the projector to go with it, there's no other way to see these things. So, for the handful of films that we did get on there, I'm very pleased that, we were able to revive them and give them a new audience.
Yeah. So, and did Universal have any rules about what you could and couldn't include, or do they have to just say yes to the final product? I mean, how does that come about? Things like that.
Different studios have different rules. They have different things that they're kind of mainly focused on. So, Universal, for instance, their main focus, actually, surprisingly, is the artwork. That's the thing where they really they want to see concept earlier on, or they want to have some sense of whether it's going to, contravene talent rules, sort of agreements with, the cast or anything from years before. But other than that, in terms of the stuff that actually goes on the disc, they've been pretty laissez-faire. They've been pretty happy for us to just kind of generally put on what we want, because, it's effectively we're liable for anything that's, kind of, not that we go and flout the rules or anything like that, but it's just, it's our release. So effectively, most of the time it is, our problem if something goes wrong. But there are other studios that maybe are a bit more strict. So MGM, for example, they want to see everything that's going to go on the disc, and they have very specific rules. And when I was working on the Arrow edition of RoboCop last year, for example, there were things that we were not allowed to include, and I begged and I pleaded and cajoled, and occasionally that would work, but some of the time it didn't. So that is, you win some and you lose some. It's the nature of the game with this business. But hopefully, if you come with big, ambitious enough plans, then you're coming up with so much stuff that you don't really miss the stuff that doesn't get through, because there's so much other stuff that does go through.
Okay.
And sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to drop in there about the quality control. I mean, I remember when James first got in touch about doing a commentary. In fact, that wasn't the first thing he asked about, but we ended up agreeing, or I agreed to do one after we'd been asked nicely to do that. But when it came to recording it, I remember it was lockdown time, proper lockdown, the first lockdown. It must have been April, May, June time. And I remember saying, well, I could get a microphone and I can do it in my kitchen. And James was like, no, we need to do this properly. Universal want it done properly. We need to get into a studio. We're going to have to wait until the studios are open again because they're all locked down. And I think it was almost day one when the lockdown was kind of lifted. I think I was in a studio. I was cycling down to a studio in Edinburgh in Leith. And I think I was the first person back into that recording studio after the lockdown. So the quality control is really high on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, there are, it's not that we never have commentaries that are recorded by people at home. Certainly we have done that. And, but it's just, if someone who hasn't done it before, we wanted to, have one less thing for you to worry about as well, and that you're recording it. So, I mean, it's, there are all kinds of ways to do it. I recorded my first commentary that I've done myself for another company, and I wound up doing it literally under a duvet, recording on my MacBook to block out the sound. So it's however you do it. It got really hot under there, so I had to do it in chunks, like 10-minute breaks. But
that's so funny, because my commentary for Gamera, this, never mind just like what a tremendous amount of work commentaries are, but I did it with this setup. I did it with these gaming headphones that my wife spent $100 on, and this microphone that I basically stole from a friend of mine, and then but I was like, but it's a little too hot, like it's picking up, there's no puff guard on it, so I had to take the pant leg of one of my pajamas and kind of sheath it over the microphone so that it could absorb some of that. And you work with what you got, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
God, it's good stuff.
So, Jonathan, you wrote the book. Was it 2015? And then I take it, was it this year or last year you got involved with Matthew Sneed to do the recent?
It was in 2019. I think it was around about October-ish. September, October, he got
And
in
then
touch
this year you've done this
to talk about
as well. So it's been quite a roll of Tremors content for you. How do you decide what to talk about on a commentary? If that,
well,
just because you've written a whole book, and you must be thinking, you know, is there certain points that you wanted to pick up on? You know, how did you decide what to talk about on this commentary?
Well, I think, as Matt said, and James knows, and anyone who's done a commentary, I'm sure knows, they're not easy. And I had not done one before, and I didn't think it was going to be easy, but I didn't think it was going to be as hard as it was. And I think I was able to cheat a little bit because I had written this book, so that was brilliant. You know, I had done the research beforehand, but then you can't just read out
your book
straight from the book. Yeah, you can't just do that. It doesn't quite work. So I don't know. I think it was just a mixture of trying to work out what, as a fan, I thought, you know, what I would want to hear. Because that's with the book originally. It was all about I wanted to read that book, and nobody had written the book, so I had to do it myself. I felt. So yeah, it was just kind of going through it scene by scene and trying to pick out things that were really interesting. Again, that I thought were interesting. You know, I think there was quite a few different passes of that commentary, and just thinking, okay, in this one, I want to talk about all the different times that it's practical effects, and when the graboid is a puppet or, you know, a miniature. So I wanted to get that in there, and then I wanted to sort of add in something about the production, the background to the production as well, which I didn't know how much detail was going to be in all the extras. Sure. But at the same time, you know, I thought I can't talk about it and not mention these things. And also just kind of add in a bit more about my own personal take on it, I suppose.
Okay, so how long?
Which in the book I didn't.
How long did it actually take then to record the commentary?
To record it was basically real time.
Oh, really? Okay.
You know, I went in, and as I say, I cycled down. I remember it was raining, and the first route I wanted to take on my bike was blocked, so it took ages to get there. And then the chap in the recording studio was just very nice, and so I recorded it once through. And then because it was the first time I'd done it, I was nervous. You know, I will totally admit that. And maybe you can hear it. I don't know. Maybe you can hear it in the commentary as well. And we did the first sort of 10, 15 minutes again, very calmly. The chap just said, "Okay, let's try that again, because now you're in the zone," sort of thing. And so start again, and I think it worked out well. But it's weird. It's just when you're on your own for 90 minutes, it's a weird thing, and because you've no one to bounce things off, and you're worried about the tone of your voice as well. I think, you know, not just sounding monotone and saying the same thing all the time. You kind of want to try and raise your voice a little bit and then vote. So anyway, yeah, it was good fun to do.
I'm just having these like PTSD flashbacks of the weeks I spent working on that Gamera commentary, just being like, oh man, did that sound good? I don't think that sounded good. Oh man, I'm such a dork. I'm such a loser. Nobody want to listen to me. It just, you know, you talk yourself into a existential crisis. But you did just remind me and purchased. Just got Seeking Perfection. That should be here in a couple of days. Because you reminded me I did not have the book, so now I have it, or I will have it.
Brilliant.
And that covers all of the films up to Bloodlines, does it, or is it before Bloodlines? No, it's
Well, when I started doing the book, as I say, the franchise was dormant, and there was no Tremors 5. And then in the last few months, they announced Tremors 5, so I had to pause the book and sort of put something in there about Tremors 5. So yeah, in the book I just sort of say it's coming out soon.
But all the information you would ever want to know about the first 4 films and the TV series is in the book.
Awesome. I'm excited to get a hold of it. Because again, like I said, you know, working on this set really made me into a fan of the franchise all over again, because I liked it for a long time, and but I was sort of one of those like, no, the original's the only one that's worth watching. And then you actually watch the other sequels, and it's like, well, they're fun monster movies, and they build on this mythos, but not too much. they don't go all Alien Covenant and be like, oh, this is Faustian science. I don't even want to talk about it. I friggin' hate that movie. But
It's definitely time for a break. I think it is time for a break. Now that we've got onto Alien Covenant, we'll be back in a moment, folks. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to the final part of Kaiju Curry House. I'm here with my co-host Alex, along with guests Matt Frank, Jonathan Melville, and James Flower. So, James, question to you. How exactly do the extras get decided at Arrow Video? Because they're always fantastic, and we'd just like to know a bit of an insight into it, really.
So I'm one of a small team of producers, we're called on Arrow. So we're essentially, there's 4 of us who were assigned a project. So like I'm given Tremors, for example, and it's essentially our job to conceptualize the whole release from start to finish in terms of, what the artwork's going to be, what the extras are going to be, what old extras we're going to carry over, if there are old extras, what versions of the film we're going to present on this, so the whole thing. So it's really dependent on you kind of doing your research and knowing your stuff. So it's really a great job for people who are good at that anyway. And I'm definitely a hardcore nerd when it comes to trying to study a film in the minute detail and uncover more information about it. So going into Tremors, I kind of knew a few facts. I knew that there were already some bonus features that had been made for the Laserdisc in 1995 that had been carried over to all the other DVDs since, but there hadn't really been anything else since. There hadn't been a commentary, for instance, by the filmmakers. There hadn't been anything about the music or some of the other special effects in the film. So there were these holes that I knew that we could fill. Very early on, we knew that there was a retrospective documentary being made already. We didn't necessarily know it was by Universal or who was making it, because as is often the case with major studios, one department doesn't necessarily talk to the other. So the people who we got the rights, the department we got the rights from, couldn't just point us in the direction of Matthew Sneed. So it was actually through Jonathan that we found Matthew, and we're able to instigate those conversations and get that material from them as well. Because, especially once COVID hit, I knew, well, we're probably not going to get Kevin Bacon. So let's go with the guys who have already got Kevin Bacon, but then we can kind of fill in some of the other gaps around that, because we knew it was going to be a shorter documentary. So jumping off from that, I reached out to a filmmaker in California called Elijah Drenner, who we work with quite often, who does like his day job is doing bonus features for lots of different companies like Arrow, and he's done all sorts of other things. He made a great documentary about the actor Dick Miller called That Guy Dick Miller, which, if you know who Dick Miller is, seek out that documentary because it's a lot of fun. But I knew that he would be a really good tonal fit for this, and he was able to get in touch with people he'd interviewed before as well, and kind of go into some, so we had a wish list of people that we'd like to try and get hold of. And we knew that, like, Fred Ward doesn't do interviews. It's just, it's effort. Like, the main thing I've heard lots of people say is, "Where's Fred Ward? Why isn't there an interview with Fred Ward?" Well, we would if we could, guys. He's just he's an old guy, and he's over it. He's not really in the mood. He doesn't, it's like, nah, no thanks. So it's like, okay, well, what can you do? Moving on. So I knew that there were some really interesting stories that we could seize upon. So the music is something that I'm really happy that we were able to get. So having a featurette that's an interview with, so the thing with the music in Tremors is that it's actually, even though only one composer is credited, Ernest Troost, it's actually a combination of 2 composers' music in the final film. So there's a really nice extra on the disc, which is about that combination of Ernest doing his initial score and then some of it being replaced later on. And actually, the score has actually been finally released by La La Land Records in a sort of 2-disc release and in a 2-CD release. And some of the interview quotes from that featurette are actually in their booklet. So we were able to tie the 2 together, which was really nice. In terms of, so yeah, it's a bit of a mix of sort of identifying what material's already out there and carrying over as much of it as you can. Seeing what other opportunities there are for, whether it's getting an expert like Jonathan to do a commentary as well, to go alongside getting the filmmakers finally in to do one, seeing who's willing to sit down and talk to us, which, obviously in the midst of COVID, we couldn't necessarily take for granted that we could get everyone we wanted. So we felt very lucky that we were able to get all the people that we did. And yeah, so it just winds up being a bit of a mix of that, really. Kind of it's part detective work and part luck, and just part hard work, just kind of persevering with trying to get everything that we can possibly get, or as much as we can get in the sort of the limited time that we have.
Well, yeah, I mean, considering the COVID outbreak, you've done a fantastic job, haven't you, of being able to get all this together?
We've been very lucky with that this year. We thought it was just going to be a year of just Skype interviews with people, and there's still some of that to some degree, but it's there are still some really great opportunities that have come up as well, and I think on the whole, fans have been very understanding about that.
I mean, just on a personal note, I'm just completely flabbergasted and extremely grateful for the fact that I was able to be involved in 2 huge releases this year. In this year, among all the other years that really kept me busy, and they wound up being as high quality as they are. Just as a fan, I would have been over the moon to get this Tremors set and to be a part of it. I really appreciate it, James, for you involving me as your 3rd or 4th choice. And but no, it's I mean, it's absolutely stellar.
I've got a question. Sorry.
No, I had a point, but I've forgotten it. So you go.
You had a point, but I ruined it. That was a tender moment.
Ruined it, Alex.
Yeah. That's me to a T, ruining moments. Oh no! I have a question from Chris Stewardson, who's a writer for Eureka, and he says this is a generic question to anyone in this room. What is it about Tremors that keeps everyone coming back? And he left it quite open. I don't think it's necessarily about this Tremors film, just the franchise of Tremors. What makes it so special that everyone kind of goes, yeah, let's give it another go? What's special about it?
If I can just say something that always struck me about Tremors is the community aspect of it, and the fact that's one of the things that's drawn me to it, and also other things like Northern Exposure, the old TV show, which I was dug the Blu-rays out today, which has that community. It's that idea of a group of people pulling together in really tough circumstances and sort of, either fighting in the case of Tremors, or in the case of something like Northern Exposure, just kind of trying to get along with each other, I suppose. But I always it's that kind of the grounded nature of the film, and that kind of, the idea that I think someone used, maybe it was Kevin Bacon, used that idea of the sort of the down home American style, the kind of just, it's ordinary folk. And it clashes with this idea of the monsters, and I don't know. For me, that's what kind of I love about it, and that's what's so good about the sequels as well. Up until, and I won't go into too much detail, excuse me, but the kind of 5, 6, and 7, they kind of lose that, and they kind of lose me as well. The films, so the first 4 in the TV series are really brilliant at that. So that's my thoughts. Anyway.
No, thank you for that, Jonathan. James?
I think it's a rare combo in that it's a film that has got some teeth to it. People die in it in ways that, particularly the doctor and his wife's death, that scene is, quite frightening and quite distressing. But at the same time, it's a film that by the end of it, it feels like a warm hug. It's, it's really, the fact that I can't remember who it is that hits upon it. Maybe it was you, Jonathan, this idea that there's really no antagonists in the film other than the creatures. The humans all kind of get along with each other in order to in order to get over this crisis. And I mean, I think that's something that is incredibly rare, because most of the time with this sort of thing, in addition to the creature being the villain, you have to have a human villain on the inside who is just as bad, if not worse, because obviously the idea has to be that man is the real monster. So whereas, with Tremors, you don't get that. Everyone bands together and they defeat the crisis, and they're all friends at the end, and you just feel warm and gooey at the end of it as well. So I think it's a mix of that. It's where it really kind of successfully walks that tightrope in a way that very few films do.
You've reminded me of some of the horrific deaths, and then I remembered poor old Fred.
Oh, Fred.
Also, it's really funny. The effects are great, and the acting, the chemistry between the cast is superb. So it's just this perfect combo of all these different things that just shouldn't work and yet do.
Absolutely, and that's the thing that's it's difficult to put your finger on what it is really. I mean, I'm seeing Community and the people and the characters, but at the same time, as James says, the humor and the horror together. I don't know. I remember once I first saw Tremors, and then when I saw Tremors 2 in a Blockbuster. I was in Toronto, I think, and saw it in a Blockbuster, and just thought, I want to see Tremors 2. And then I searched out Tremors 3 and 4. You know, just, I don't know. There's just something that kept, drawing me back.
I think that I mean, you guys really hit a lot of the nails on the head with regards to the tone of the film, because it really is, in a lot of ways, it shares a lot of similar DNA with Aliens, but the difference is that Aliens is an Alien, I should say specifically, is a brutally, oppressively dark film, and that doesn't make it bad. Obviously, it's a classic, it's a masterpiece, but Tremors, you can have a little more fun with it, and as a result, I think some people think, well, you can't take it seriously if they're cracking jokes, but it's like, yeah, but it's also not. It's not overwhelmingly funny, because the peril is never treated as a joke. It's the characters and the simple absurdity of them being these eccentric group of people who live in the middle of friggin' nowhere, which of course is a relatable American experience for a lot of people. But just and I think that a large part of the appeal of course are the monsters themselves, because we don't really learn anything, at least not in the first 4 films, what the Tremors are, or I keep calling them Tremors, what the Graboids are, and what and where they came from. I mean, there's some conjecture about Precambrian life forms or something like that, or came from outer space or whatever. But I like that inherent mystery. It's one of the things I was reminded recently with the Gamera set about. One of the appeals of a kaiju or a monster movie is you don't really know where the monster comes from. Alien Covenant! And you just and I think that's one of the things that makes them so fun, because you can go take them anywhere. You can do anything with them. Because, I mean, it could have been so easy for them to just make a sequel where there's just more giant worms. But instead, they decided, oh, no. They have a life cycle. And there's like another phase there, like, which I got called out a little bit, because I did that Graboid X-ray, which I just did for fun. I just said, hey, James, can I do this? And he's like, yes, please, stop yelling at me. And and people were like, well, where are the Shrieker eggs? And I'm like, it's the first movie. It's just the first movie. Just leave me alone. But I also try to keep it ambiguous, because I think that ambiguity is one of the things that makes the franchise have a lot of appeal, and also allows for the franchise to be very malleable and for them to kind of do whatever they want with it. That's why people keep coming back to it.
Yeah, I think you've all touched upon it brilliantly, because it is that perfect mix of horror and comedy that's, everyone can get and enjoy. We're not looking at the military, we're not looking at the scientists, these are just people on the ground, it's happening to them, and we're watching it unfold with them. So it's just great fun, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's a kind of lightning in the bottle that you don't really, and I think so much of that kind of comes to the filmmakers who made it. So Ron Underwood, Brent Maddock, and S.S. Wilson, who are all, there's a generosity of spirit in the film that I think really comes from them. I think if you ever get the chance to speak to any of them, they are just the nicest people in Hollywood. People in Hollywood are not meant to be that nice, and they are really, really very, very nice. And it's and I think that is part of the thing that shines through in the film. In a way, it's a shame they haven't made. Obviously, Brent and Steven made the Tremors sequels, but in a way, it's a shame they haven't made more or different creature features or more horror films or whatever. It's anything that's kind of in a sort of similar wheelhouse to Tremors, because it would be very interesting to see what other directions they could take the genre into, while still kind of maybe retaining that generosity of spirit. But I don't know, I think it's something that's very uniquely them. I've often tried as a kind of, because it was Ron Underwood's first film, and it wasn't necessarily guaranteed that he would be the one to direct it. He had to kind of impress a lot of people along the way. And I've tried to kind of play that game. Well, who else would do it? And who else would pull it off as well? And I can't really think of anyone. The only other director I can think of who was sort of at Universal around that time, who was also up and coming, was Sam Raimi, who I adore Sam Raimi, don't get me wrong. And there's even I think some kind of Raimi-esque touches in that, like the kind of the POV of the worms going under the ground, which I think is quite a very Evil Dead-esque thing. But Sam's sense of humor is more kind of Schadenfreude-laden, kind of slightly more sadistic than I think it wouldn't necessarily have been as nice a film, if Sam Raimi had directed it. So I think I'm grateful that it's the film that it is, because the people involved in it were the ones who got to make it.
Yeah, I can't see Sam Raimi doing quite the right job for it, because whilst Tremors can be quite a harsh film with the deaths, it's never cruel or gratuitous. And Evil Dead is gratuitous. I'm not saying it's not a good film, it's great, but it's quite cruel, whereas Tremors is quite joyous in many odd ways.
Sam Raimi hadn't quite learned to rein in his excesses yet, so maybe it's it is
absolutely
a good thing that he didn't
and just to say, Tremors has a lot of young fans, a lot of children. It's bizarrely a kind of family film. You can watch, it's that's just so.
Well, I think a lot of people have said to me about this kind of release, do you think I can show it to my 9-year-old yet? Can you? And it's like, well, yeah. I mean, other than that scene with the Doctor and his wife, which is probably the scariest bit in the film, I think it's pretty harmless. It's pretty,
yeah.
I mean, the last thing I'll say is that I think that it's one of the things that keeps it from being cruel and keeps it from being and keeps it fun, is that unlike the Evil Dead or something along those lines, where the cruelty is the point, where the horror aspect comes from, this doesn't need to happen. This is just some horrible things happening for no reason, and that's what makes it scary. The graboids are still animals. They're hunting, and they are also acting maybe on territorial instinct or whatever. That's why they're trying to kill everyone, but they're also eating. They're just hungry. And so as a result, that scene of the because that was the scene that made my wife not want anything to do with the film, was the Doctor and his wife getting killed. She was like, oh my God, that's horrible. And I've had to explain to her, like, well, yeah, but that's because they're showing the threat, that the threat is serious. It's not a slapstick like, whoa, it popped his head off and now we've got to juggle it around. I don't want it, you take it. It's nothing like that. It's and I think that's one of the things that makes it kind of brilliant and accessible.
It is time for us to round off the episode with our personal recommendations. What we normally do, gentlemen, is we say to our listeners, if nothing else, go ahead and do this one thing, and we can all give our own opinions. So I will start us off, because I wrote it down before anyone else jumps in there. My favourite bonus feature was actually the extended interview with Ron Underwood. And I watched that last night with a cup of tea and the remainders of mince pies. And I was just struck by how calm and unpretentious Ron was. Like, I was really quite stunned by it. And you were saying earlier, James, about how he had to kind of do some impressing. It really came across how he said that he kind of went and pitched the idea, and it didn't seem to kind of be taken immediately. Then he had to go back in and be more exaggerated and be more full on. And that's what worked. And I thought, well, that seems contrary to his personality. He seemed so humble. And I thought, right, I really want to meet this man. So the next best thing I've got to that is that wonderful interview. So do look out for that. Jonathan, please, if nothing else, what's your recommendation?
On this box set, I mean, I love the VFX, the practical effects guys that are in the documentary, because some of them I didn't manage to speak to. I spoke to about 50 people involved in the films, but there's some of these guys I didn't manage to speak to. So I thought it was fascinating hearing some of their input and just some things I didn't know. And that was a real treat for me, is to learn things that I hadn't written about. So I think that's brilliant. Plus, cheating a little bit, but I'll just mention the bloopers, not the bloopers, the alternate versions, the edited versions for TV. The
Outtakes.
Oh yeah.
The language, the
Pardon my French.
Yeah, pardon my French. Yeah, so that's two. I cheated, but
Fantastic.
just so many things to talk about.
Most definitely, James.
My favorite bonus feature on the disc, God, it's a tough one. I think it's a mix between, probably a toss up between the short film I mentioned earlier, recorded live, and like I said, I was really pleased we were able to get an interview on the music, because it's an aspect of the film that hasn't been talked about very much, and that visual effects documentary as well. It's very hard for me to choose, because I was so pleased with how all of it came together. pardon my French, the TV dubs comparison. So I edited that together based on, I got a very wonky VHS transfer of the TV cut, and was kind of, it's very confusing because there was still a lot of son of a bitch and damn, but then there'd be other bits where that would be dubbed over. So it was very inconsistent and very odd. But but yeah, that was a lot of fun to cut together. I'd also, very quickly, I want to shout out another creature feature that I saw recently, a new one that's come out that I really enjoyed. So if it's if it gets a chance to have a few more eyeballs on it, is a film called Save Ourselves, which is it's essentially, it's about two hapless hipsters who kind of go on a sort of nature retreat up at New York State, and while they're out, kind of, they've turned off all their mobile phones or whatever to be closer to nature, and while that's happening, Earth is being taken over by these alien creatures who basically look like tribbles. They call them poofs in the film. They're kind of like these kind of like critters type things that just suck out people's blood and things like that. And it's a really kind of funny, sweet, kind of cool creature feature with a lot of good character comedy, and it reminded me of Tremors a bit in some ways. It's kind of like sort of Tremors or Critters or something like that, but with hipsters. So I think if you can, I think you can rent that on Amazon Prime. I think so. If you have the opportunity to see it, then please do.
Oh, brilliant. Sorry for interrupting you there. I was going to say, I need to thank you, James, because you in the last episode with us told me about Warning from Space coming out, and I immediately pre-ordered that, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's good.
Well, hopefully Arrow can continue pumping out some more excellent tokusatsu gems from the Dai library, courtesy of our friends at Kadokawa Pictures. So watch this space. Maybe later in the year there'll be maybe another episode of Kaiju Curry House.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
Matt, what would be your recommendation?
Specifically from this set, I'm a big fan of commentaries. I've already listened to the one by Ron Underwood and the writers, but I have yet to get around to Jonathan's commentary, so that'll be next on my list. I love putting them on in the background while I work, but of course, at a certain point, there are certain movies where I'm listening to the commentary and I'm kind of watching. I'm like, I kind of want to watch the movie now, but the commentaries almost always turn out to be gems. So I'm excited to come back around and listen to that. Outside of this Blu-ray, gosh, I live and breathe this stuff, so I'm always recommending stuff to people. We're putting out all this. SRS is putting out all these great indie kaiju flicks from their production house, and of course, Arrow is doing this season has been so busy, I've hardly had time to sit down and really watch stuff. So I got Warning from Space, and I haven't watched it yet, which I know
it's fantastic.
bad, but I'm excited to watch it. You know what? I'm going to make a recommendation for a book that I recently read. I don't know if y'all have talked about it on mic yet. Devolution. It's by the same writer who wrote World War Z.
Oh.
And the subtitle, it's Devolution, and the subtitle is the first-hand account of the Mount Rainier Sasquatch Massacre. So it kind of has a bit of a Tremorsy vibe of like a little cheeky, and it's about a small community, and there is a creature element to it, but it is like, man, I was on the edge of my seat for a lot of that. A lot of it. I was listening to the audiobook version, which they got a bunch of different actors. I think they got Malcolm Reynolds. What's the actor's name?
Nathan Fillion.
Yeah, I think they got Nathan Fillion to do at least one of the voices. It sounds like him. I could be wrong. But I recommend that. If you like stuff like Tremors, you'll probably really like Devolution. It's good stuff.
Fab. And finally, Paul.
On my Tremors marathon, I've really just been focusing on the films rather than the special features. So I'm going to have to say I'm looking forward to seeing the extended Making Perfection documentary, seeing as we had the guys on and I've watched the 30-minute version. I know that's on disc 2, which won't be available on the normal version either. So another reason to get it now.
Get it now.
Yeah. And if you go on the Tremors YouTube channel, they have an extended interview with Kevin Bacon, which they did not offer us for the Blu-ray, unfortunately. But
that's a shame.
It is a shame, but you know, it's on YouTube and you can watch that. But otherwise, the ones that are on the disc are really bloody good. So
Yeah. And I suppose outside of this, while we're on Tremors, I will also mention that Wolfie's Just Fine music video, Trying to Sleep, all about the Tremors film. It's fantastic if you haven't seen it yet. No, he's got an album out called Perfection, and the songs are based on the film.
Nice.
And that song is written from the Graboid's perspective of he's just trying to sleep, but they're all walking around. So it's good. It's good.
That's awesome.
Well, it is time for us to say goodbye. It's just a shout out to Jonathan's book. It is Seeking Perfection. You can get that on Amazon for just over £10. So it's an absolute steal. As always, if you get a copy of any of the things that we recommend, please put out a review on Amazon. It's really important to the content creators. And thank you very much to our guests. Keep it kaiju. Bye for now.